Hello YouTube, and welcome to another one of my reviews. And today we're going to be talking about a classic, a very old machine. This one's, I would have said, 32 years old, 33 years old. And it's the Electrolux 560, part of the 500 range, which was introduced around about, I said 12 years earlier than this, in the very early 70s. And I shall show you what it derives from in just a second, because I've got one over there. Now this machine has cropped up on Roger's channel in the last few weeks. He's had a couple of these, and he's had a couple of problems with them. So I thought, well, I'll get my one down, and we'll have a look at this and see if I've got the same problems with mine. But we'll go into that in a little bit. But essentially, this machine, the 560, at the time it was the top of the range. This was the one that it had the twin turbo fan. It had an adjustable power, so you could turn it down from maximum up to minimum. It had, you could have an integrated hose that you could stick into the back, or you could have it off the cleaner, so you didn't have to carry the hose around with you. It had the suction control down here on the base. I'll go into that in a little bit of detail a bit later on. It had the dual height setting, had a little illuminated light on here, so it was, you know, it was quite the la-di-da back in those days. So, the Electrolux 560, what was around at the time? This was made, as I say, according to the label inside, it was 1983. And in 1983, Hoover had just released the Turbo Power 1. So that was their cutting edge technology at the time, the Turbo Power 1, which was a dirty fan machine. This one was actually a clean fan, it was a clean air machine. And I would have said, even when it was launched in the early 70s, it was ahead of its time, being a clean air machine, because Hoover at the time were producing the 652 and the Hoover Ranger. So these, they were always very, 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 I would have said, modern. So, this was the machine that this one derived from. Now, in terms of age, there is a good 10 years difference between the two of these. This machine is the Electrolux 500. This was the original, the very, very first one, when they first launched back in 1970. I think it was 1971 they first launched these, and the label inside here says this was a 1973 model. So this machine is nearly as old as I am. It's 42 years old, this machine, and you wouldn't believe it, would you, that it was 42 years old. It's still got the original rubber around the base here, albeit very perished, but because you found a lot of these, the rubbers perished and dropped off, they broke in the corners, split. This is going, but it's still intact, the green rubber on. So I mean, how good's that? So, with these, one of the best things I found about them was they had the power switch. If we're going to do the reviewing the way I normally do, I'm going to go from the top down, don't I? So, by talking about the top, we've got the two power switches at the top here. On this machine, it's just a standard on-off switch. On this machine, it's got a little neon light that comes on. Now, when the mains comes on, and the cleaner's turned off, that glows orange. But when you turn it on, the light goes off, and the motor then comes on, which I always thought was rather strange. So that it was lit up when it was turned off, but when you turned it on, the light went out. Very odd, that. When you turn it round, you can see the cable here. It comes out of the top of the handle, which I thought was another very good feature, because when you look at the Sevo X4, it does that on there. A lot of the other decent cleaners have the cable coming right out at the top, so that you're not forever tripping over it when you're pushing it along. So, on this one, this, I believe, has had a new cable fitted at some time or other. I don't think this is the original cable, because what we found is, especially with this type, is that the cable had a really, really bad tendency of cracking. the outer insulation on these cables, it tends to perish after a while, and when you turned it or bent it, it would tend to crack and split. Now this one's split in a place around here, right? It's got some tape over at the moment just to make it a bit safer. But I'd have said the prone position was in this area here, where it was constantly moving backwards and forward, and the cable would break inside there. And you know, I think it could short out and end up blowing the fuse in the plug. So, got the cables there, like that. They weren't the longest cables, I think they were only about 6 metres long back then. We didn't get 10-metre cables in the early 70s and the 80s. The same here with this one. So if we unwrap the cable here, okay, if I'll just see how long that is, a rough estimate. I think it's longer than 6 metres. I said that maybe an 8-metre cable on there. The 6-metre one is only stretched from one side of the room to the other. This is a bit longer than that. So, it's a bit strange. I don't normally do with 2 cleaners both at once here, so just have to bear with me because I haven't done some of these videos for quite a while, so I've got to get back into the swing of things again here. Now, as we're going down from the top, what we had here, on top of here, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll get the camera off the tripod and I'll bring it over. So, what we got, there's the top of the machines there. On this machine, you had the variable power. On this machine, what it was a bag whistle. And that was able to be set to certain settings here, which would determine on how full the bag would be before it would start to whistle. Go from 0, which I think was possibly, the whistle wouldn't work at all. In other words, it was always turned off. And then you had number 4, and 3, 2 and 1. And when it was turned down to number 1, I think that would be quite sensitive, so even if there was only a little bit in the bag, it would start to whistle. It was basically to detect if there was a blockage in the machine, that one. I don't know whether I just had the camera pointing at that, but yes I did, yeah. Right, on this one, you got your minimum, which was, now the machine's only about 500 watts anyway, so you know this was probably only about 200-300 watts, and you could turn it up to normal there for normal cleaning, and then all the way up to boost there, which they said, according to that, was for use with the tools. That was for normal carpet, and this was for delicate rugs. Okay, and that was the electronic power selector. So we just leave that on minimum for when I start it up a bit later on. And then what we have was the back door here. We could open that and then hinge it open like so. And then what we had inside here was the bag. This point here was another weak point. When you consider that you were constantly opening this and closing it like so, that would tend to crack in there. You had a little rubber, or should I say a foam gasket there, which on a lot of these it tended to disappear and get lost or get broken, but it's still there on that one. And if I open this one as well, you can see there it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same layout. Where you've got your sponge again here. That was the inside of the bag whistle there. That detected the pressure inside the bag housing. Then you've got the bag here, and that will just lift out like so. These are obviously generic bags. In the bottom of there, we can't really quite see, there's not enough light, but there was a filter, and we take that out like that. These are, I think I replaced these filters. I ordered some new ones and put them in. And in the very bottom was another type, if we can't really see, it's not light. There we go. Actually, I might have a torch. I'll just find that. You can point it down in the bottom. There we go. So we can see there's another secondary filter just underneath there, just before it goes down into the motor. And again, when I had the cleaner, all this got cleaned out. Let me just turn that off. And the filter then will go back inside. And then the bag just drops inside there like so. So your dirt would come up from the bottom through the head through here, up through the head there to the ducting, and it would come up the back up here to this point here, and then it would go through here into the bag, through the bottom of the bag, down through some more ducting, and out to the motor in the bottom. So again, it was a very, very complicated air path when you consider what it was being compared to at the time, which was the dirty fan. It was the Power Plus and the Senior Ranger. In fact, when this was made, it wouldn't have even been that. It would have been the 652A or the 6525, beginning of the 70s. So this version was a very complicated system. Right, just close it back up and lock the bag latch. This is exactly the same on this side. You've got the two filters underneath the bag. Gasket on there. You can lock that up. Now, down on the power head here, you can see there's very, very little difference. The one thing there is that on this one, the later model, you had the two-position height adjuster. Okay. On the other side, there was no height adjuster on it. It was only a single height. Right, now, tipping them back over. Seems to be some noise going on in the street out there, I don't know what's going on. Right, let's see. So there's the comparison between the two. Now I think the one on the right, the 500, hasn't got the correct sole plate on. What happened there, I had a 502S at the time, and I believe the sole plate on this one was very damaged, so I put the one from the 502S on. And somebody told me it wasn't, it should have had a different style underneath here, so this wasn't quite correct for this machine. But the other side, the 560, that is exactly how it would have been when it was new. So if I just put the camera down here, we'll turn these over. Right, there we go. So that's the base of the 560. We can see the brush roll there, and that's got brushes on both sides. Okay, and this one is for the, I think originally what this had, it had the brushes on the one side and it had a beta bar as you went around onto the other side. But because they were really worn out when I first got this machine, I mean it was in a really bad state, it needed an awful lot of cleaning up, this 500 did. So I just put bristle brushes on both sides, so it would clean a bit more efficiently, because the brushes were totally and utterly worn out. So you know, I managed to salvage some bits, and we got that done. So I think on this one it's got fixed wheels. But that one there, you can see the mechanism there that moves the wheels up and down, and there's the latch there on the back that controls whether it tips back or not. Okay, let's just stand them back up again. Right, now on the backs of the machines, what we got here, this was the port. Again, that's the 560, and this is the 500. That's got variable suction, if you notice there, on the 500. You could turn that from max to min. This one doesn't have it, because it has the suction control on the top of there, like so. Now what we could do, we have the hose just over here. Now the hose would plug in into the back of here, and then twist round, and then it would be a hose machine. So what you'd do, rather than the suction going from here down to the power head, it would then be diverted straight through the hose. And that was rather a clever way of doing it. You didn't have to have the tools on the back of the bus. You were limited then, as that you'd have to keep carrying the tools around in a separate place or storing them separately. But it would make the machine lighter. I mean, it was a light machine. So, let's take that back out of there, close that. And again, you can see there it's got like a yellow pedal, which was quite a groovy theme at the time. It had a sort of a darker green floor head there, and we can see, I don't know if I can get close to there, you can just about make out how perished that was on the corner there. And again on this side you can see the way the rubber's perished there as we go around. There we go. So, if I put the camera back on the tripod now, on the top, and we can push them round. Right, so what we do, we plug the 500 version in, and we can hear that one running. They were very quiet machines. Put that one out of the way, and off we go with this one. So that's a lovely machine. I think the mechanism's a little bit worn at the bottom now. It does tend to tip, but I think that's because I put too much grease on it. There we go. That's the 500. I'm a bit pushed for time, you see, because my camera will only record for about 27 minutes before it cuts off. So I have to try and get them in quite quickly. That's the 500. Okay, let's put that one back out of the way. And now we'll have the 560. Now you notice the bottom does stay in position on this one, it's not as badly worn. Let's plug this one in. Now Roger on his video had problems with his, what do they call it now, the suppressor, which was in the top of here. And I'll just go a bit into that. You notice now when we turn it on, the little light comes on in the handle there, which is what it's supposed to do. And what we had in that handle is this suppressor here, which on two of Roger's machines, when he plugged it in and turned it on, this suppressor actually blew up. It blew the end off when all smoke and everything came out, which was something I was a bit concerned about when I saw that, so I decided to remove the one from my machine. This looks like, from the date 489, that this was replaced at a later date, because the cleaner was made in 83 and this says 89 on. So there's a good chance that's been replaced by a repair person. But that's the part that gives all the trouble, which is built into the handle behind where that orange light is. Okay. So let's just put that hose out of the way. Now, when we start it off, we'll start it in minimum, and then I'll turn the control up and down. That's minimum. That's normal, so that's halfway around the dial. Notice how lovely and smooth that motor is, how really quiet. There's no squeaking, no raunchiness. That's maximum power, that's full power, that's what is apparently used on the hose. So if I plug the hose in, it's had a fair amount of power. We tried with a turbo tool. No, it wouldn't drive the turbo tool, it wasn't powerful enough to do that. We'll just give it a quick push round then. So there we are. I mean, that runs absolutely sweet as a nut, doesn't it? That is such a sweet machine. When that sole plate's off there, and I looked at it at the bottom, with all the bearings greased in the brush roll, and a new belt and everything on, and the motor all cleaned out, that runs as good as it did when it was brand new. And this machine is 33 years old this year. 33 years old. Now there is a little bit of damage on there. What I did was put some masking insulation tape over the top, some clear tape. But there is, if I just bring it up here, you can see what happens on there. You can see the damage that's happened there. It's cracked and revealed the blue cable, the neutral wire inside there. What happens is it does get very perished over time, the outer cable, and if you run over it or bend it too much, it can split. So if you've got one of these, be very, very careful of this cable. I mean, really this needs to be rewired. It's not really that safe. I could do with getting some more cable to put in here, and I've no doubt I will get around to that in due course in the future. But for the time being, because it doesn't get used, it's part of the collection, and it just sits upstairs looking pretty. Then that's exactly as it was, it's all original. So just unplug it now. So there we go, that's the Electrolux 560, and a quick introduction there to the 500 as well. And as you can see, they were both very, very, very similar machines. It's a design they ran on with for quite some time, if you think about it, between 1971 and I think 1986, possibly around about that time is when the 610, which was I think the replacement for this, came out. So it had a good, I'd have said a 15-year run. And then after that they carried on with that design, but it was more like a budget design. I think they called it the twin turbo, the turbo 500, I don't know. But it became a very, very budget machine. It didn't have any of the modern, the suction control or anything on there. It was just a basic machine, very similar to that, without even a bag whistle or anything on. That was just blanked off. and they ran on then for several more years after that, into, I think it was into the, possibly into the early 90s, before they discontinued it. So, you know, it had a good run. But there we go. Roger did his version of it, so I thought, well, I'll do one of mine as well. It's a machine that I always want to keep because it does remind me of my childhood. Is that I did have one of these. We did have one in the 80s. We had a 550. It wasn't quite as good as this one. It didn't have the adjustable power on. It just had the bag whistle, if I remember rightly, the 550. It was a slightly different colour on here. It had a gold colour faceplate. But there we go. That's the Electrolux 560, and I will see you again on the next one.